attracting liquidity, but liquidity is ruthless. It will just go to the best yielding farm. And that's what's happening, unfortunately. And so now there's a comp proposal to modify and vest those rewards, like Synthetics did it. So that leads me to, I think like there obviously needs to be more optimizations in the incentive layer, and like, you know, making sure that you'd rather attract and you'd rather acquire high value customers that have a high LTV versus acquire, you know, 1 million customers for one day and then are gonna just leave and there's no retention. So there needs to be more emphasis on retention, more emphasis on LTV, and ultimately having a very healthy ratio. Because at the moment, like 99% of the protocols that we look at or I look at are just not thinking about that. And I get why, you know, because it's very competitive and they want to attract liquidity. But in the long term, I think it's not going to serve them.
If I could just jump in real quick here. Something that was a really good explanation. So to give you some background, like I'm Brian, I'm one of the co-founders of Rabbit Hole, and we spend a lot of time thinking about this. We're convinced that a lot of these protocols and projects are kind of just weighing every user and every address the same between liquidity mining, retroactive airdrops. They're kind of rewarding every user the same based off and not really accounting for like the long-term LTV. But if projects and protocols actually just looked at the transaction history of each user and started being able to form a new reputation based off that user, then we could probably do much more efficient token distributions. So if, for example, if someone like Aave or Synthetics actually looked and see if these users, you know, participated in a protocol upgrade or voted in protocol or even, you know, staked in a competitor, then we could probably start to have multiplier and boosters on these liquid mining programs that would lead to much more efficient retention and LTV in these networks as well. So at Rabbit Hole, we're kind of making this process a little bit easier for protocols to do these token distributions based off the user's transaction history. So definitely interested in this topic and looking forward to discussing it more.
Just a quick thought on some of that. One of the things that I've seen through a lot of DeFi is that there isn't really a great distinction between what is the product and what is the customer. And of course, in any free service, to a certain extent, if you are not buying the product, you are the product, right? Like that's the story of Robinhood. But when we talk about things like flighty liquidity, right, and people sort of chasing high yields and moving from pool to pool, that is to a large extent how public capital markets work as well, and that you get asset-based reputations. So you'll see like insurance firms are very heavily invested in things like agricultural investments because they tend to be extremely stable, irrespective of public stock market conditions. And so I would be really curious to hear sort of from that perspective, like we're talking about CAC and LTV and acquisition costs for users, but in some ways the liquidity is the user, and crypto's always had this relationship, right, where like it's not like it's one person, one vote, it's one token, one vote. So there is a bit of a plutocracy in the way the product has always been constructed. So how do you sort of see the differences between the product of users and the product of liquidity in these markets?
Yeah, I'll jump in here real quick. So I think liquidity and productivity are probably two different things in cases. Like if each marketplace has a demand and supply side, then you want to being able to incentivize the supply side as much as possible. I think a good example of this is like you're a strategist. It's like, how do we reward your strategist for doing their work properly versus, you know, how do we get like Wi-Fi liquidity into a liquidity pool, right? Like those are two separate things like we need to incentivize. And so we're strictly talking about the LTV and retention of the year-end strategist as opposed to the liquidity in the liquidity pool.
Did you have any other thoughts on that for there? Oh, someone go ahead. No, someone's gonna. I want to.
No, I was just saying. Ultimately, you are paying for liquidity in a sense, liquidity of your assets, right? So when people are trading, they're really paying for the aspect of their trading. Like the fact that you have liquid assets, it's worth something to some people. So it will be interesting to see assets, I guess, popping up in DeFi space that have much longer lockup periods.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think one thing that's like important, like kind of an important advancement though, is also like the the decentralization of the liquidity side. I mean, we all know that like most markets, especially trading markets, are very much like Pareto principle. Like a very small percentage of participants are doing the majority of the liquidity. And I do think like more advancements, like one of the things that we're working on with our options protocols are really much more advanced versions of AMMs, because we kind of think like the constant function concept is totally broken. But it's definitely proved that like there's a market for it. But the idea of putting liquidity pools behind them, as opposed to like, you know, just I guess analogizing it to legacy finance, and like most exchanges that you would go on, or most liquidity that exists, is going to come from a very small percentage of, you know, it's going to be Citadel and Jump and probably like, you know, 10 to 15 other firms that are making up 99% of the liquidity that goes through the market. And you know, now being in a position where users kind of, you know, where a user can actually pool assets behind kind of advanced market making functions and liquidity providing functions, I think is a very important aspect to this. And you know, and it kind of like begs the question of like defining the value, the long-term value of the lifetime value of a user, specific to that side of the equation relative to like a taker. And obviously, you know, we need both. So yeah, I mean, we're definitely looking heavily in both sides of that, and kind of how do you optimize for both sides of the liquidity function.
And that's also what was interesting about Radium, that I guess just launched on Solana, right? They call themselves AMM, and you can participate in the pool, but they really trade as a market maker on the central limit order book. And I think this brings almost like AMM, or the concept of pooling liquidity, much closer to traditional finance, I guess.
From a products, or go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I didn't have
no.
Nope, good.
Okay. I'd be curious to know, Leighton, Michael, from your perspectives of how you see this from product side, and how you measure the value of these particular customers, I guess from Pulled Together or Star Atlas.
Yeah, you know, and I was actually going to make a comment on the you know, previous topic of discussion. I think it's probably only tangentially related, but I would kind of like to see more refinement or progress in terms of value created through the protocol token itself. I think we're seeing a tremendous amount of innovation surrounding the actual serving to leverage, to trading pools, liquidity within those pools, and then you know, some of the newer protocols like synthetics or options platforms. You know, the services that are coming out are really fantastic. The tokens, though, the governance token is generally related to this incentive mechanism, or subsidy into the people that are participating in those services. Now, you know, we've seen these governance tokens be used for things like voting on the protocol itself, but I'm just wondering if there's possibility to enhance the utility of the governance over time, and if that's worth spending some energy into developing out. Now, for us specifically, we're really looking at utilizing these protocols as a way to supplement the play to earn model within gaming. You know, so for those not aware, it's really just the value propositions there is that you get entertainment value out of it. However, you know, moving into the kind of a new paradigm, the ability to extract value from the game for that invested time is really what we would like to deliver to the player. Now we can do that through NFT, you know, asset ownership, so that the players actually have full possession of those items that they either created or earned or purchased in game, and then you know, providing the liquidity around that through marketplaces. But with respect to liquidity pools specifically, you know, essentially the ability for these players to monetize assets that are also not in use. And the term particularization has been used, but in essence, taking one of your game assets, putting it into a pool, and letting someone else around the world that maybe couldn't purchase that asset or afford it, allowing them to rent it and use it in game, take advantage of that asset as a way for them to monetize their time, and then at the end, at the end of the gaming experience, return that back to the original owner. So that's one of the key mechanisms that we're looking to utilize DeFi for. Not only the liquidity pools and the subsidies, but the monetization of unused assets.
Michael, I have a question for you. How much weight do you give to the utilization of it and kind of the monetization of tokens and things within the Star Atlas ecosystem? How heavily do you get in and kind of look at some of the loops that exist with it, and how what kind of a role does that play in kind of valuing the end user? In the same way that you incorporate various game loops that kind of emote different, that kind of give different types of feedback for the user and create different types of emotions and stuff. How heavily do you guys look at that in the context of your platform?
Well, I'm not sure I completely understand the question, but for us, in various game activity has certain weighting for the subsidy of distribution. For example, if you own land within the game, it's a valuable resource. And you possess equipment that operates on that land, then that has a particular subsidy rate associated with it in terms of the inflation schedule of either one of the two tokens that exist within the ecosystem. Is that kind of what you're referring to, or can you?
Yeah, but more like tying the monetary aspect of play to earn to the actual loops that kind of keep people engaged with it.
Oh, gotcha.
Is there a direct correlation between it?
Gotcha. So, no, I think ultimately the reason people play games is to have fun, right? So, everything that we're doing is really driving around how do we create an enjoyable game experience first and foremost. If it's not fun, people aren't going to play, regardless of whether or not they make money off of it. So, we just think that that's an additional advantage and incentive to retaining players. And it's something that is now more possible than ever because of, innovations around crypto and blockchain, NFTs, and all of these other innovations. So, but first and foremost, it's about the game.
Got it.
Hey, Leighton. I know you've been pretty quiet this chat so far. Do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I think my only comment was, we were talking a lot about incentivization of LPs, liquidity providers, which for people who are on here, that just means people who deposit cash money into protocols. But I think what I wanted to really drive home is right now, in my opinion, LPs are way overpaid and contributing community members are way underpaid. So what I mean by that is forum moderators or people who are helping provide customer support and things like that. And I think that protocols are really, really open to protocol governance are really open to ideas. And so if you're in this chat, I would really encourage you, if you want to get more involved, jump into some of these discords and start pitching, be hey, I want to do a proposal to create a grants program, or I want to do a proposal to fund a hackathon, or I want to do a proposal to fund a bounty or whatever. And I would just really encourage you to try and dive in and go for it, because I do think to what we were talking about earlier, right now DeFi protocols way over allocate to capital providers and way under allocate to community contributors.
Oh, 100%. And go ahead, Santiago.
I share that sentiment quite a bit. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is right now, all the DeFi protocols have, enormous amounts of value, and that's even before Ethereum to layer 2. So protocols are going to be hundreds of billions of dollars of value, even more. And right now they rely solely on governance tokens with no fee accrual. And so I'm is it are we going to see a protocol vote in a protocol fee to fund the protocol. I think Wiren does this, right? But like Uniswap still hasn't done it. I don't think Compound is taking huge fees. And so are we going to see protocol fees more often voted in by the governance? Or do you think that incentivizing and having the power to govern is enough to be valued itself? If that doesn't make sense.
I have the same question. That's essentially what I was referring to before I kind of commented on Star Atlas specifically. But Alex, I completely agree with you on that.
Like my feeling is that like, so because the Compound team and the Uniswap team, like they have tons of tokens, they are incentivized to work on it, they have a vesting schedule, like that's fine. But after the 4 years, like when the Compound team goes on to do something else, is the protocol going to issue a protocol fee, like a very tiny one, just enough to pay open source developers, designers, grantees, marketers? Or is it going to be so big and a high market cap anyway that like no one is really going to say anything, even though there's no money being, coming in? And I find it crazy.
Well,
I think markets always value growth over fees, and so I think we're so early. Like Compound has $10 billion. That's not really that much money in the grand scheme of things, and so I don't think we'll see, and I hope we don't see fee extraction for a while still, because the narrative right now should 100% be about growth, not fee extraction. So that's my perspective on it.
I think your point around, so how do these systems self-sustain after a vesting schedule like elapses, I guess. I mean, I don't see that as a primary concern as much. I mean, I think there is vested interest of multiple parties around the table to continue to uphold the functioning of the system. So, like as an Aave holder, I think governance rights are important. I mean, I understand why some people might not see the value in perhaps being able to govern what is proposals for some of these protocols, but I think over time it will become increasingly valuable. Whether the team stays on or not, I mean, I think part of the decentralization is I guess there's multiple approaches. One is like synthetics, where you have a team that it is like a dual tier structure where there's like a core team, the synthetics team that is building on it and gets paid from treasury, and they have some vesting schedule, but it's very centralized. The product development is very centralized, and I think it should be that way. I don't think that like pure decentralized, or I guess the other model is Yearn, which is very inviting, more bizarre, like, and everyone can come in and just build stuff, and the community can vote on it. It's a little bit more chaotic, but some really cool stuff can come out of it. I tend to lean more on like a synthetics type of approach, where you do need to have some sort of, as Kane likes to say, a benevolent dictator, like that is literally cracking whip and making sure that things are getting done. And because for instance, even Yearn had this problem where some people own Wi-Fi and that's fine, and these developers are getting paid. There's a strategy fee, but it's a very competitive world out there, and I think they found themselves in a bit of a struggle whether they didn't have enough Wi-Fi to support and pay and reward core contributors. And so ultimately it all really comes down to incentives, and I think some protocols just don't to Leighton's point, which I agree on, is we ought to just think through how we're incentivizing the teams and community members, and a lot of these tokens there's really no reason to just hoard a token. You know what I mean? Like Wi-Fi, okay, like you own Wi-Fi, but what do you do with it, right? There's really no. I'd like to see more usability in Wi-Fi, whether it's securing the protocol, there's a hack or something, right? Like Maker and Synthetics and Aave do function as like the backstop of a protocol in case there's a default. So anyways.
Okay, I have a quick follow-up question, if that's okay. So maybe it's the applications that will carry the protocol. So for instance, like let's say layer 2 Ethereum 2 is live next year, and so Dharma finally has product market fit because it's so much easier to use Dharma, and then Dharma is now incentivized to govern Uni without implementing any fees. because that's better for their business and they're making money off the Uniswap protocol. And so maybe the fat application thesis, meaning that it's the app that actually make the money and the protocol is a public good, would be true. And that would be also true of Aave, who is trying to build like a neobank on top of Aave. So maybe the protocols would never have a fee, but the value and the protocol fee kind of accrues at the application layer versus the protocol layer. Is that true?
I definitely think that's true. I think applications built on protocols are wherever the protocol is actually touching the consumer, which is at the application layer, that's probably going to be the easiest place to monetize.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I love this question because it's fundamentally an OpEx question. Like, what are your operating expenses? Because if you look at something like a very traditional financial institution, it's hugely expensive for them to run their operations. We're not just talking about compliance, but like how many Chase branches are there in Manhattan alone? And that's like part of how the expense ramps up. And this relates to when we're talking about like, are we properly rewarding community managers? Are we properly incentivizing people who help people get onboarded? Well, another word for that is customer service. And all of that stuff gets very expensive very quickly. So there's a real question is like, is the business model of DeFi, to sort of go back to the title of this, code that largely self-executes and there's a little bit of maintenance done, but like fundamentally what you're talking about is a network that is self-sustaining and has minimal user interface components that are directly built on it? Or are you talking about creating something that is a more fully managed service? Like, does DeFi start having customer service reps you can talk to about stuff? Are there, these very sort of soft traditional finance components to it that start plugging in? And that's a case where you really start needing to be generating substantial revenue on like the protocol operations side just to be able to support all of those people doing all of those things. It's still way less than traditional finance, but it's way more than what the current overhead is.
I think that's where the importance of actually generating and creating a product that adds value rather than relying on incentivization to build a user base really comes in. And that's where the longevity over those 4 years are really going to show. I think that's an interesting viewpoint, Federa. I would love to kind of talk and break this down from like more of an enterprise level to more of an individual level, and kind of tokenization of specific individuals, whether it be social tokens or just kind of NFTs. And I think Alex, glad to have you with us, man, but I think you might have some interesting perspective here. If you want to give a quick intro as well, I know you kind of jumped in late of who you are and what you do.
For sure. Quick intro of me, a crypto intro at least. So I've been in the space for 18 months now. I started with Meta Cartel, which is kind of like the rebel way of getting into crypto, like the outliers way, which is super cool. And I just learned, crypto native consumer facing applications. I'm very like a consumer founder versus, like a DeFi person. Like I'm kind of financial savvy because I've been in the space. But anyway, so I was basically losing money in DeFi because DeFi protocols are very dangerous. I did like a DEX aggregator swap, and I lost a ton of money during COVID, like in March. And I was in France at my parents' house. COVID was there. I was broke. And so I was like, okay, I need to fundraise a little bit of money, and let's do that in an innovative way. And so I did an on-chain income sharing agreement of $20,000 with the Alex token. And so that allowed me to move to San Francisco and found a company. And now I have this company. It's called Showtime, and it's an NFT. It's the distribution layer of NFT. So we query every single NFT on the Ethereum blockchain, even on layer 2, like Foundation, I think was on Matic, and others are on layer 2. And we add a like button, a comment button, a follow button, because basically our thesis is that NFTs right now is very transactional. It's a lot of marketplaces that look like eBay, but the creators of NFTs really are, Instagram type creators. So why not create the Instagram of NFTs? And because we just talked about, the distribution layer being the one to accrue value, I think I'm very bullish on this, especially as, the NFT space is more consumer, it's less rational as DeFi. And so the distribution layer really is key here, because consumers, like if they have the network effects of getting the people they like, the creators they like the content of, they will not switch platform as easily. And so the switching costs might be high, and so this might be like a great case for a company. And so yeah, like the step one is to build the Instagram of NFTs. And then, once you have people with crypto wallets, you can do lots of crazy DeFi things like social tokens, where maybe every creator can have a social token backed by future NFT royalties. And so now it's very interesting because you have fundamentals on social tokens, unlike the Alex token, which was kind of like a meme. Here, it's backed by royalties, and that could allow for a for-profit Patreon model. And then you can think about also the very long-term vision of the master plan, which is a decentralized social media where you can own your content, so the NFTs, but you can also own your audience, like your following, your followers, and you can port that over to any SDK, like any developer building a front end and using the social graph openly to build a new social platform for any content type or any geography, like podcast or newsletter. And so that's kind of Showtime. So Showtime is like, we're starting with digital art, but really we want to expand to all kinds of visual content short term, and then like memes or celebrity photos, and then any kind of content online. Yeah.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just like that's it. Like if you have any questions or if you want to talk about NFT or social tokens, I'm super game to do so.
Yeah, I think personally for me, the social token thing is really interesting. It's one of the more nuanced versions of DeFi and kind of how individuals are raising capital and tokenizing themselves or their progress, and allowing individuals to bet on their growth and using that as a mechanism to expand out on. Kind of on the side of the business model, to stay on topic, would you want to give like a quick 1 or 2 minute breakdown of how actually tokenizing yourself works and what the benefits of it are?
Sure. I can talk about this, but I think as Brian will also add, well, okay, he just left. Like the business model of Alex. Well, so Alex started as an income sharing agreement where I said, I'm taking $20,000 in from like people I knew from the space. So there's Dan Finlay from MetaMask, or the founder of Zora, or a foundation, etc. And like a lot of people just supporting me as a founder getting started. And so I basically, like, my reputation was the collateral. Like there was really high trust assumptions, which some DeFi people did not like with the Alex token. But I was just trying my best. Like I was not making revenue on chain, so it was really hard. So I had to just all my off ramp every month from the money I was getting. My money was on chain, but it was not pegged. It was not programmatically enforced. So I had to share my revenue every 3 months, and I'm still doing it because it's gonna last 3 years. So I'm like 1 year in now, and this is what I did, like a income sharing agreement on chain. And then because it worked pretty well, and like I had some media coverage, I decided to do other things. So with Austin Griffiths, we did a token weighted pool with my token. And so it's funny because this project with Austin kind of inspired this balancer engineer to launch Snapshot Labs. So it's like my jokes with social tokens and this kind of like Alex meme actually was helpful, just like trying to understand what was the future of DeFi. And so gasless voting with token weighted polls, which Austin Griffiths did with me, was pretty fun. And so for us, it was just a gimmick. Like it was like, what habit should I do in July? Like wake up early or run 5 miles a day or stuff like this. Like it was just very silly and superficial, but it was helpful to get people engaged. And then I did a third thing, which is a token permissioned chat or token permission Discord, which was funny. It's like a bot that checks on MetaMask the number of tokens that you own, and if you sell them, you get kicked out. And it seems like it was like the biggest use case for social tokens today, like Friends with Benefits or Whale or Karma. They all do that. Like it's like a token that is the required paywall to get into a chat. So yeah, I did a ton of small use cases with Alex all throughout the year whilst I was figuring out what's next for me.
I could see this being really popular with OnlyFans.
Yeah, so the thing with the Alex token is and Brian has the same. It's like it was not that successful. I had to go out of my way. I'm a huge exception because I'm someone who posts a lot of content on crypto Twitter. So like people knew me. And so my reputation was the collateral. It was not programmatically enforced. And so this could not scale. The trust assumptions were too high. I was too technical. Like, you know, it's like I had to over-engineer so many things that no one is willing to go through. And so to really make social tokens boom as a category and really overtake Patreon and make like Ethereum the new Patreon settlement layer, we need to have low trust assumptions. And I think the NFT boom right now is very interesting because we can then do, you know, DeFi programmable NFT royalties backed social tokens, and with, you know, Sybil resistance and maybe even like proof of work of social tokens creators. Like, you know, if you have a social token, you need to post 4 NFTs per week or you will not get your linearly vested social token. I think that would be fascinating. Like really DeFi and social tokens and NFTs are going to merge in very cool ways where it's less risky to trust someone, and thus you can really unlock a new world of investing in your artist career, and actually not even investing, because, you know, like we don't want people to be hurt financially. And so what we can do is like an artist can say, I am selling 10% of my royalties to my early followers, to people who share my work. And so for the fans, it's a zero cost thing. They just share the artist. And for the artist, like it's free distribution, it's growth hacking for free. No, well, actually not for free. Like they're selling some royalties, but it pays the fan. It like has a stronger bond with with their community, and it can further their brand to you know, break even and even do way more money from royalties. So yeah, that's kind of like what Blau is saying too in his article in the Defiant, the investable layer for creators. I recommend you check it out. But so yeah, that's some ideas around the social tokens and NFT and DeFi space.
Yeah, I want to second that. If you haven't had a chance to read that article by the Times, it's really good. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you think that this is analogous to what we're seeing in, I guess, the social tokenization of professional athletes, you know, selling lifetime earnings or being able to invest in their lifetime earnings. Thoughts?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. Like Spencer Dinwiddie, a basketball player, just sold lifetime, I think, was it lifetime earnings or was it something like his contract? But I think, you know, whenever you peg something to the real world, there is custody and like it's a security token because it's a salary in fiat. And so I think that the real key, at least what will work first, is people who make money on chain, right? And so this is why I'm starting Showtime, because if you think about it, NFT creators are the first ever people to make money on chain, besides miners. But miners are less interesting because they are service providers. They are, you know, substitutable. But you can substitute creators. They are unique. They are consumer facing. They have an audience. It's exciting for consumers. It's a like mainstream type application. And so this is why I'm really excited about NFT creators, because they are the first time we can actually programmatically enforce without crazy oracles or custody risks involved.
And just to set the room real quick, we're coming up on time out of respect for some of the panelists. If anyone has any questions or wants to jump on stage and contribute to the conversation for a little bit, feel free to raise your hand and we'll bring a few folks up. If not, I would love to just get any like final thoughts on the topic. Alex, I really appreciate you taking the time to share all that, man. I think your story in particular is really interesting, and you've taken a really cool, unique approach to tokenizing yourself and just the entire business model of DeFi.
Thank you for having me.
Austin, or Austin, the third one up here. We're half the room's Austin. Austin Griffith, it's good to have you up here with us, man. Did you have any comments or anything you wanted to add?
We need to mint Austin coin. There's a bunch of us.
Let's do it.
I was trying to stay off stage, but thanks for pulling me up here. I appreciate it. I think one thing to really dig into is maybe even like a lot of this stuff that brings utility to these tokens happens off chain. Right? The ownership of the token and the transferring of the token is on chain, but then whether or not you get into this Telegram channel or whether or not, you know, there's so many different things that we can do with voting and with all sorts of fun like utilities we can give to NFTs. And I think that's what I would almost like challenge the room to figure out, along with business models with DeFi too, right? We're seeing that built into like insurance and NFTs and stuff like that. So it's not just pretty pictures.
The question I have for you also on that is, what do you think is currently not being handled correctly to properly incentivize individuals to take action? Because I think we have a lot of these mechanisms that allow folks to be involved and vote and to do other things, but we see a lower level of engagement relative to what we see on just speculation. So kind of what needs to change in order to see these actual mechanisms take place?
Ooh, that's a tough one. That's probably beyond me. I'm like a lowly builder who likes to build all the tools. I mean, yeah, a lot of what we see is people speculating and a lot of like money flying around, right? It's a lot more interesting when we find utility and find real uses for things. When someone says it's the Instagram for NFTs, that gets me really excited, right? That's a lot of usage and a lot of utility there. So I think that's probably the key, is just find something that's really interesting and really important to someone. But yeah, it's hard to compete with DeFi speculation.
Yeah, it's like a powerful monster. Oh, go ahead, Alex.
No, yeah, I was just saying, like, it's true actually. Like, the NFT space is booming. It's still an asterisk in the scheme of things. Like, DeFi is still so much bigger, and DeFi is still so much smaller than Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is still so much smaller than finance.
So early. It's the Wild West.
Yeah, it's only getting started, and I have faith, Austin, that if it's going to be built, you will do it. You execute on a level unlike anyone else I know. Christine, it's good to have you up here with us. Did you have a question or comment on anything?
Yeah, how many minutes do you guys still have?
We're coming up, but go ahead, do your thing.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I am part of the Solana hackathon. I'm working with a cybersecurity expert for more than a decade for the Air Force, so she's the leader of our team. My question for Solana is, since you guys are focused on speed, and I like the consensus mechanism of proof of history, and Anatoly mentioned in a YouTube video about 5G, since he's from Qualcomm and the founders are from Qualcomm, how does Solana fit in the new business model for 5G? That's my question for everybody.
I can probably talk a little bit about this at a high level, and hopefully it gets you most of the way there. You probably watched the videos and maybe you got this pitch already, so hopefully I'm not regurgitating too much information here. But the idea here is that essentially the distance between towers to support 5G is significantly lower compared to, say, 4G, which is, I forget the exact distances, but it's orders of magnitude in difference. And the concept or the opportunity here is that setting up the infrastructure to support something like 5G is extremely expensive. And I think that's particularly applicable in regions that are relatively remote and kind of hard to get infrastructure deployed in. And that's where the opportunity is to have third parties, whether it be infrastructure providers in specific smaller regions, or just even in denser cities, similar to what Helium's doing at the moment, to help provide these relayers, for lack of a better term, and support this network, which kind of shifts reduces the infrastructure cost for the actual telco providers or whoever owns the spectrum, and also allows a way for everyday people or people who are enthusiasts to be able to participate in this program, where they can be a part of rolling out this infrastructure. It's from, I think the other challenge as well from discussions we've had is, if we were to take this, if people who own the spectrum take this sort of approach, the issue is with accounting and managing all these different stakeholders that traditionally isn't in this space, especially not in 4G, where it's probably a little bit less intensive in terms of administration. And blockchain is kind of great for tracking and automating that kind of incentive payment structure, and also ensuring that, also for monitoring the actual service and uptime of these various nodes. that people could run or third parties could run. It's definitely more of an enterprise play, and it moves significantly slower, unfortunately. But that's generally the gist of what our vision is for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could just sort of one component to add on to that is the radio complexity of 5G is astronomically more complex than 4G. And part of what that means is that the phone is sending multiple simultaneous connections to potentially multiple towers, which means that the actual, the accounting portion is incredibly difficult, but it also means roaming becomes incredibly difficult when you're talking about towers owned by multiple entities, and not just sort of tracking and management of even, is this device authorized for what kind of plan in what kind of area? So there's a ton of components like that that are also all tied up in this, from prepaid phones and bandwidth options to just literally keeping track of what tower is talking to what at what time.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I think the only thing I want to add is there's a really detailed video of Anatoly talking about this use case on Solana YouTube. It's coming up on like 7 or 8 months old now, so we've definitely changed a little bit in the strategy there, but it still has tons of really helpful information in Anatoly kind of discussing this in a little more detail. I think as you go from 4G to 5G, the towers go from kilometers to yards, where you need them every couple of yards in order to maintain the strength. And so with that, you have a lot of issue with noise as well. And it's a long-term play. I don't know, Dom, is there any movement there on our end?
We're not pursuing it aggressively right now. We are keeping conversations going. I think the key challenge there, probably, maybe it's not just for 5G, but for enterprise solutions in general, is that technology is cutting edge, especially for traditional entities, and they've got third-party providers that are part of their ecosystem that solve these problems for them. So trying to upend that whole thing isn't going to happen overnight. And I think technology is very much so just one part of the problem, and there's a large coordination challenge with having all of these corporates coordinate with each other, agree on a standard, and kind of agree to roll this out all together. It changes from region to region as well, in terms of who has how many players there are, the way the regulatory environment is set up as well. So definitely a much slower moving beast.
Totally. Great question, Christine. Thank you for that, and thanks for being part of the hackathon.
Oh yeah, it's exciting. I'm excited to be part of it. You guys are amazing. The community is amazing. The developers, the people are helpful, and Barto's Twitch event was very helpful for my team, and I shared it with them. And our focus is on self-sovereign identity, and most of are actually in OAuth and Fusion Auth. Marlene, who's our team leader, is a cybersecurity expert. She's senior cybersecurity expert for a big bank under a NASDAQ 500 company. So we are excited to present our solution on governance for corporations. So look forward to having you guys. Thank you.
That's awesome. Side note as well, if given that you guys are in security, I'm not sure if you guys do research, do any like white hat hacking on the side as well, but we actually do have a security bug bounty, a pretty large one. So feel free to get involved in that if you guys ever get time. We've been really lucky. We've already got some really great researchers in the space helping out on Solana. Some of the German CTF teams have been finding plenty of involved.
Yes, I was listening to the that there's some security issue when it comes to corruption on validators, especially individual validators, and we have been brainstorming about having like an identity focused on having a decentralized app. So anyway, I will connect with you, Dominic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys, for having me on this room.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
I just wanted to echo the sentiment that it has been absolutely amazing working with the Solana and Serum teams from the developer standpoint as well. You guys are providing a tremendous amount of resources and just guidance and expertise. And thank you guys for all you do.
Of course. And the preface is not a Solana show zone, but we appreciate
okay,
appreciate the words.
Where can we try Solana today? Like, I'm an Ethereum maximalist. Like, I want to try Solana today. What do I do?
Oh man, that's a great question, Dom.
I think Bartosz, given its technical. Sorry, I'm going to handball this one to you, Bartosz. But yeah, I think you'd probably be better suited to answer this.
Sure. So maybe, yeah, we are doing a bit of ping pong. I'm not going to pass it to another person. Do you want to try it as a user, or do you want to try it as a developer?
As a user.
So as a user, there's a bunch of resources that we have that you can go and try from the DeFi perspective. Since this is focused on DeFi, I would start with going to Serum DEX. There's a bunch of them. I'm actually fairly excited about how Serum structured their model, where they really thought hard about how the fees are actually broken down across the products. Like, what should be allocated to the people that are building front ends, what should be allocated to the people that are building the protocol, and what should be allocated to the people that are actually providing liquidity. That kind of circle back to the conversation that we had, 30 minutes ago. So Serum DEX, then there is an automated market maker that you can try. There's swap.serum.com. And the one that went live this week, which is Radium, which I'm even more excited about because it's doing something that I believe it's much harder on other chains, where you have a pooled liquidity, but it's executing it on central limit order book. And the liquidity providers earn rewards from basically acting as market makers on the central limit order book, which is much closer to centralized finance model.
Interesting. So one quick question, like Compound Chain is coming soon, I think. And it will be super interesting because, if it's multi-chain and it's aggregating liquidity, then, like it will be interesting to go on Solana because Ethereum has so much liquidity, but on Solana it's so much cheaper. So like, I'm not trading Solana, like my life is entirely Ethereum today, but I feel like, are you going to integrate Ethereum MMM or something like, Compound liquidity on Solana? Are you working with the Compound team or I don't know?
Yeah. So I will talk okay, Dominic, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So they're still in the early phases of building that infrastructure out, but yeah, the intention is for us to integrate together with them and be one of the supported chains.
That's
so.
Yeah, along with several other really interesting protocols. Alex, and I think to add on to your question is we do understand the importance of interoperability. We believe Ethereum has an incredible community. They've laid the foundation for a lot of what we're experiencing today, and that it's critical for us to work with a lot of the existing products on them. And then we just offer our own benefit, which is faster finality. It's significantly cheaper. And there are other products aside from just financial products. There's games, not yet launched, but like Michael and team are building Star Atlas, which is really, really exciting. There's a Soul Survivor that's a blockchain based Street Fighter game, which is really cool. That came out of the last hackathon. Decentralized messaging, and so on and so forth.
The other thing worth mentioning in terms of like bridging liquidity, we actually have a very interesting design for the bridge that we are calling Wormhole, which is a trustless bridge that's running POA across the Solana validators.
I guess I got to drop, but it was great chatting with everyone.
Of course. Thanks, Santiago.
Take care.
Yep, I'm going to go now. Thank you. That was nice.
Bye, everyone. Yeah, I think we're just about at time anyway, so I think we may cut it here. We're already actually 10 minutes over. But this has been super awesome. So thank you everyone that jumped on board and was part of this. We have another one on Thursday, and as a reminder, hackathon ends on the 1st. So I appreciate everyone's time. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
看不懂，我可能也就不会买。它可能会有上涨，会有怎么样短期的这个波动和获益，但对于我来说，它不是一个稳稳的幸福。就是你要看你要拿到的收益是你是需要稳稳的幸福，还是需要这个一年翻10倍的幸福？我觉得一年翻10倍的幸福会让人睡不着觉，但是稳稳的幸福会让你觉得睡觉睡得很踏实，第二天早上起来你会